The concept of the pipeline. Anytime that there is a hole in my business, it always goes back to the pipeline. I am 16 years in the business, 6 figures a month. And I know that all of my holes in the business or all of the holes of my teammates can be solved by looking at the pipeline of the business. So what I'm going to do here today is, I'm going to reintroduce you again, hopefully for the 100th time, on the concepts of the pipeline. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up my shared screen here and I'm going to draw it out. You guys are going to be saddled with my terrible drawings, which you're going to have to watch because you have nothing else to do here for the next little bit. So nobody's really allowed to complain out loud. You can text your friends, you can kind of make fun of me behind my back, and I'm okay with that, right? But what everybody's going to have to do is everyone's going to have to see the pipeline again. So I'm going to draw this out, and I want you to be able to draw it out just like I do, okay? Because this stuff's super important. So let's say we got a pipeline. Now, I live in Alberta, oil country, used to be the industry to be in. Now WFG is the business to be in, not oil and gas, right? So this is called the pipeline. It's called the business pipeline, okay? So any successful pipeline has to be pressurized. Okay? Now, before we figure out what we got to put in the pipeline, I always like to start with the end in mind, right? What do we want coming out of our pipeline? Well, I know what I want. I want lifestyle. I'm here for lifestyle. And for you, that's going to be different than what it is for me. But at the very beginning, you got to figure out why you're here. The first part of the pipeline is you got to figure out why you're here. See, I get so many people, they want to master the presentation. They want to learn how to close. They want to make all this money, but guess what? They have no idea why they're here. But Steve, I swear to you, I know why I'm here. There's not a lot of evidence that supports that you know why you're here. That's step one. Once you know why you're here, we need something called a prospect list. Right? Prospect list. That means we need to be able to put names on the list. Names on the list. Once we have names on a list, we have to make contact, which means we have to make calls. Okay? Once we have a name on a list and we make a phone call, then we have to do a presentation. Now, we can do a webinar or we can do one-on-one, right? There's different scenarios for both. But once we do a presentation, then we need to do follow-up. Once we do follow-up, either for the business or on the recruiting side, then we get the recruit. Once we get the recruit, then we get them into licensing. Once we get them into licensing and they get licensed, then they can start to make sales. Once they make sales, then they can make cash flow. And once you make cash flow, then you can build your lifestyle. In the beginning, you're putting in a lot of effort here. You're pushing. But you got to continue to fill the pipe all the way to the end. And in the beginning, it's like a little tiny faucet with a little leak. It's like drip, 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 drip. And then all of a sudden, it starts to gush. And then over time, once you fill the pipeline, it's this massive machine that cannot be stopped. So, what happens if you get a little hole right here in licensing? Well, you get a lot of people on the list. You make a lot of contacts. You do a lot of presentations. You do a lot of follow-ups. You get a lot of recruits. But all of a sudden, guess what happens? There's a hole right there. You're not getting anybody licensed. Well, if you're not getting anybody licensed, there's nobody making sales. I will tell you right now on this call, 98% of the holes in this business for most people right now are in steps 1 and 2. Prospect list, contact. Most people's hole is right there on the contact. There's a lot of people that are sure practicing the presentation a lot, but they're not making any calls. There's a lot of people that have a goal to do 330. They're not making enough calls. There's a lot of people that want to make a lot of sales and make a lot of money, help a lot of families. They're not making enough calls. At the end of the day, my great mentor, Ed Milet, said 98% of the problem with people's business, in our business, is putting a name on a list and making contact. 98%. So you got to figure it out. If you're not earning $2,000, $3,000 a month part-time consistently, if you're full-time and you're not making 5, 6, 7, 8 grand a month full-time, this is the highest paying industry in North America. If you're full-time, you should be expected to make 6 figures your first year full-time as a marketing director. No questions asked. And if that's not happening, then it's simple. Most likely, there's not enough sales getting made. Okay, thanks, Brainiac. Okay, well, why is that? Well, you're probably not licensing enough people. Well, why? We're not recruiting enough. Well, why? There's probably not enough follow-ups. Okay, right? Have you ever been following up with the same person for 3 months? You need to get more follow-ups in the pipe, brother. You can't just keep following up with the same person. You need lots of follow-ups, right? Well, I don't have a lot of follow-ups in the pipe. You're probably not doing a lot of presentations. Well, why am I not doing 3, 4 presentations a day? Well, because there's not enough calls getting made. Well, whatever reason there's not enough calls getting made is probably most likely your hole in your business. So, which brings me to my main topic. I want you to write this down. I'm going to give you the 5 mental barriers to lack of activity. 5 mental barriers to the lack of activity, which for most of us, it's lack of contacts. 5 mental barriers. Mental barriers to the lack of activity. Man, most of you can crush, and don't take this the wrong way. My 9-year-old could do the presentation. Okay? But here's the situation. The number one mental barrier to lack of activity is not being in the environment. Okay? You got to get in the environment. If you live around an office within an hour, you got to be in the office as many days in the week as you can. If you're remote, you got to build an environment where you are. You got to build the environment where you are. So not being in the environment. Okay? You got to fight, claw, scratch to be in the environment. Until I was making 500 grand a year, I was in the office 7 days a week until $500,000. 7 days a week until $500,000. Not for 8 hours every day, but I was in the office every day until 500 grand a year. Okay? Every day. I am not talented enough to do it any other way. Okay? If you're remote, you need to create an environment. Have people over for Saturday training. Create a little environment on your own. And I got to hurry here, chap. We just blew through time. Number 2, you're not tracking inventory. You're not tracking inventory like a pro. Okay? You need proper and professional way to track your inventory. You got to be following up with the right people. You got to be building inventory. Your inventory in our business is people. And your list is a living, breathing organism. And you should always have 40, 50, Ed Milet always told me between 50 and 60 people on your list at all times. These are people that haven't said no and they haven't said yes. They're kind of in between. 50 to 60 working list at all times. If you have a list of 6 people and you're expected to run a business, come on. Are you kidding me? 6 people on your list? No wonder nobody picks up. You're calling the same 6 people every day. That doesn't work. You got to be building inventory all the time and tracking it. Number 3, right? The third barrier here is unwillingness to get uncomfortable. Unwillingness to get uncomfortable. There is no negotiation here. None. You must get uncomfortable every day if you want to win. If you want to win, you must get uncomfortable on a daily basis. And unwillingness to do so, boom, leads to lack of activity. Lack of activity. I see so many people inconsistent. They have a really big week, then a slow week, then a really big week, then a slow week, then a really big week. They get uncomfortable and then not. They get uncomfortable and then not. And it's obvious in their results. So let me review that. Number 1, not being in the environment. You got to be in the environment if you want to win big. You don't have an environment, you create one. You know what I did? I was 23 years old when I started. I wanted to create an environment. So I knocked on my neighbor's door and I asked him how much he would sell his house for. He said it wasn't for sale. I offered him 250 grand. He goes, it's sold. I went to my bank. I took all the equity out of my house. I put 30 grand down on the house next door. I bought it. I built 6 offices and I started running my team out of the house next door to me. It was called the Boiler Room. Rob O'Bang was trained out of that house. My SMD came to my house next door to run full-timers meetings. I created the environment. I brought people in. I built it. When I didn't have any money to spend, I spent it anyway and bought the house next door. I knew the importance of building the environment. Number 2, tracking inventory. This is an all the time thing. All the time. You're adding names all the time, every single day, 20, 30, 40 minutes, especially if you're not doing 8 or 9 appointments a day full time. 20, 30, 40 minutes a day, building inventory, adding names, getting referrals, reaching out to clients, meeting people as you go, always adding names and tracking it. I have inventory tracked to the 15th phone call that I make to people. I can tell you when I made the first call, second call, third call, fourth call, 12th call, 14th call, and I can tell you the result of every call. Do you track your inventory like a pro? Because if you track it like an amateur, you're going to get amateur results. But Steve, what spreadsheet to use? Just the one that's on our website that I've been training on for 16 years. I mean, just the one that I gave you for free. That's all. That's just the one that we've been talking about, right? Like we hand it out. Everybody has it. Number 3, again, to review, is your unwillingness to get uncomfortable. You got to get uncomfortable every day. Every day. Want to buy my life back. Want to retire my spouse. Want to make 6 figures, man. Like, Steve, like I would give anything. I had this guy once at convention be like, pull me aside in Vegas. Steve, I would give anything to make your kind of money. And when I had a moment when he wasn't with his wife, I pulled him aside and said, no, you won't. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't give anything to have my income. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, if you would give anything to have an income, you'd have my income. You're not willing to get uncomfortable like I was. You're not willing to make the calls like I was. You're not willing to get rejected like I was. So don't tell me that you were willing, that you wanted to have what I have, because you were unwilling to do what I did. Let's just be honest. Because if you're willing to get as uncomfortable as I was, then you'd already have your life back. You'd already have your home paid off. You'd already have your spouse retired. Let's just call it how it is. There's a leadership call, Nabby. You got me fired up with that haircut, bro. I don't know what's going on right there in that red chair, but you're getting me dialed in. Unwillingness to get uncomfortable. Number 4, mental barrier leading to lack of activity. Not confident around getting a result on the phone. Not confident around getting a result on the phone. If you knew that everybody you called would say yes, how many calls would you make? Well, part of getting confident on the phone is not caring what people say, by the way. That's part of it. I'm not calling you to see if you'd be interested in life insurance or joining a business. I'm calling you to book an appointment to get together. When you get confident around getting a result on the phone, everything opens up. So my 4th point is not being confident around getting a result on the phone. How long should it take to get good on the phone? How long should it take? Four hours? 45 minutes? 11 minutes? 12 days? As long as it takes. As long as it takes. As long as it takes. There's never a valid excuse not to be good on the phone because you have the power in you to practice. Before I got good, I practiced for 3-4 hours a day for like a week. When I got the presentation in my hands, my first week licensed, I practiced the presentation 100 times on 100 separate pieces of paper. I took 100 sheets of paper, Nabby, and I wrote 1 through 100 on them. And I wrote it out 100 times in a 7-day period. And guess what? I took my SMD on 6 appointments. 6, all on one day, on a Sunday. And I never took my SMD on another appointment again. Not a follow-up interview, not a startup, not a field training appointment. He took me on 6 appointments on one Sunday. He showed me 4 carrybacks from those 6 appointments. He showed me how to do 2 follow-up interviews. And there was not another meeting again in 16 years I ever brought somebody on with me. Not another meeting ever again. Not that I didn't want it. I just didn't have access to my leader because he checked out really early in the business. So are you practicing your craft? Are you getting good on the phone? Our business is people. We have 440 million people to work with. You need to find 7 to 10 long-term to make $1 million a year. Are you kidding me? It's not how many calls should you make, it's how many calls can you make in a waking day. You know, Greg was on training today and he gave me a great compliment early on in the business. Yeah, I made 40, 50 calls a day some days. But I wanted to win big. I wanted to get good on the phone. I can't imagine ever making like 3 phone calls in a day, ever, and struggling financially. Because if you're struggling financially, you make as many calls as you need to book as many appointments as you need to get the job done. My 5th mental barrier that leads to lack of activity is this: delusion about what activity is needed to hit the goal. Delusional about what activity is needed to hit the goal. What's the number? What's the number? How many appointments do you have to go on to hit your goal? See, the biggest mistake I see people make here is they say they need to go on 6 appointments a week to hit their goal and they do 3. I did the math. You want to hear something crazy? Do you want to know what the difference between going on 3 appointments a week versus 6 is? As an associate, it's 40 grand a year difference. 40 grand a year difference. 40K. So if you set the goal at 6 and you do 3, you're going to make 40 grand less. That's a lot of money to me. It might not be a lot of money to you. It's a lot of money to me. And I make $125,000 a month, 150 some months. And 40 grand a year is a lot of money to me. Do you know what the difference between 3 appointments a week and 6 is as an MD? It's 61 grand a year. And as an SMD, it's 80 grand a year difference. As a marketing director, this is a 6-figure business if you're full-time. Trap's about to go over 100K. Gary's about to go over 100K. Hubka's about to go over 100K. As an SMD, part-time, you're making 40 to 50 grand a year. Very part-time. Working 2 days a week, part-time, 50, 60 grand a year as an SMD, part-time. Part-time. You can have a full-time engineering job and do a couple meetings a week and make 40, 50 grand a year as an SMD. The difference between 2 appointments a week and 4 appointments a week and 6 appointments a week is being in the base shop for an extra 5 or 6 years. It's working for 30 to 40 years here to get your business going, or working 8 to 10. Man, I was telling Trap, Greg Shernako's on the call today. Rob Aubin and myself and Greg were all in the office around the same time. We're all around the office around the same time. And I was in the hospital for an entire year, and it took me 2 or 3 years to recover. I'm not making excuses. It just is what it is. And now here we are today. Here we are today. Our great friend Greg Shernaka, 1,300 licenses. And I got 400. Why is that? Because when I was lying in the hospital, I wasn't doing meetings. I wasn't doing appointments. Now, I was right where I needed to be. But here's a guy that started right around the same time as us with almost 1,400 licenses. And I have 400. Why? Because when I was lying in the hospital fighting for my life, Greg was doing his 6 to 8 appointments a week. And as a result, he has an extra 1,000 licenses than I do because he got that year and a half on me. And he makes $250,000 a month. $3 million a year, and I make $1 million. Why? Because it was that year that he passed me. He got ahead of me, and I couldn't catch him because I was right where I needed to be fighting for my life. That's the difference. That's the difference. That's what it takes to win here.
All night, you know we got it like that, got it like that. All night, you know we got it like that, got it like that. Every day I get it, every day I got it, got enough, so I split it. Everybody solid, worldwide, now I'm trending.